Imagine yourself alone, in the dead of night, in a place where every shadow seems to come alive, where every sound echoes like a warning. You feel your heart pounding harder, sweat beating on your forehead. Something isn't right. But this isn't a horror movie. It's very real. Tonight, we're diving into a chilling story where the line between reality and imagination blurs, where the rules you thought would protect you might not be enough. Ready to uncover what lurks in the darkness? Brace yourself, because what comes next might just make you question everything you thought you knew. And if you're as captivated as we are by these eerie tales, don't forget to hit that like button, leave us a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with others who love a good scare. Your support helps us keep bringing you the most thrilling stories on the web. You should be all set. Are you two going to be okay if I leave now? Jerry asked, already halfway to the door. Yeah, it sounds simple enough. We just run through our routines and follow the instructions. Piece of cake, Zach replied, smirking as he folded his arms across his chest. Yeah, we'll be fine. Thanks for showing us the ropes, I added, offering a wave as Jerry reached the door. But just before stepping out, he paused, turning to face us with a grave expression etched into his withered face. This goes without saying, but make sure you follow the rules to the letter. I've seen too many young, bright-eyed kids like yourselves come back here. Under different circumstances, the way he said that sent a shiver down my spine. There was a cold finality in his words, tinged with a hint of sorrow. He had seen things. Before either of us could respond, the door slammed shut, leaving us completely alone. I could feel the tension in the air. What was that all about? Is he saying we'll die if we don't follow those dumb rules? Old man's full of crap, Zach huffed, shaking his head. I pursed my lips, trying to shake off the uneasy feeling. Maybe he just wants us to be cautious. I mean, they're probably common sense safety measures. But I bet Jerry's witnessed his fair share of accidents over the years. I'm sure he's just trying to watch out for us. Yeah, you've got a point, but he didn't have to be so dramatic about it, Zach replied, still crossing his arms. Hey, I don't mind a little drama every once in a while. It shows character. And by the way, have you read these yet? I asked, picking up a sheet of paper with Monday printed at the top in large, bold font. Nah, hit me with them. What's the damage? As I hurriedly scanned the page, my brows furrowed involuntarily. The more I read, the further I got, the more confused I became. A sense of unease crept over me as I began to read aloud. Rule number 1, start your patrol 15 minutes after 10. A little girl will approach you while performing this task. Do not speak to her. Rule number 2, a demon will present itself to you at some point during your shift. Place a holy talisman around your neck, and it will not be able to cause you harm. Failure to do so may result in possession or death. Rule number 3, ensure that you're locked inside the guard shack with the door securely shut by exactly 2:37 a.m. Do not step outside for any reason until 2:42 a.m. Restless spirits tend to get grumpy at the beginning of the week. Below the list of instructions was a hastily scrawled addition. Rule number 4, bring a copy of these directions with you and stay together at all times. I locked eyes with Zach as I finished reading the rules. His expression matched mine, a mix of confusion and disbelief, before a smirk slowly spread across his lips. Then he began laughing, tears welling in his eyes as I stood there, staring blankly at him. What a load of crap. Do they seriously expect us to believe any of this? A demon presenting itself to us? Come on, I've heard of rookie hazing, but this is a bit much, don't you think? Well, yeah, it does seem a bit wacky, I admitted, pulling out a drawer. But on the astronomically slim chance that this isn't a prank, I'd rather be safe than sorry. I produced a large Ziploc bag from the drawer and held it up for Zach to see. Someone had slapped a piece of tape on the front and written talismans in black Sharpie across it. Zach scoffed as I plucked out a tarnished gold amulet inscribed with some sort of ancient writing. Really? You're buying into this? Sort of. I mean, what are you afraid of? Being a little too fashionable, I retorted, displaying my fresh new bling. Zach couldn't help but grin. Fine, whatever. Give me one of those, he relented, fishing in the bag before producing his own talisman. His was shaped like a cross, with faded green emeralds encased within. See. Now was that so hard? If you're done being a drama queen, let's get the show on the road, I said, pointing at the clock on the wall. 10:15 on the nose. Zach mumbled incoherently to himself before reluctantly trudging to the door. I snagged the list of rules before following him outside. The cemetery was eerily silent. It was summertime, so I would have expected to hear some insects or frogs, maybe an owl, something. But the only noise I picked up was our footsteps, my own breathing, and the occasional light howl of the breeze as it swept through the grass. If I wasn't in a graveyard in the middle of the night, I might have found it peaceful. "Hey Nate," Zach asked, shattering the silence. "What's up?" I replied, shining my flashlight between tombstones. "Did you ever think that maybe this job might be a little, I don't know, too easy? We're getting paid quite a bit, and it doesn't seem like we have to do that much. Protecting a giant yard full of dead people can't be that demanding, right?" I bit my lower lip, his words stirring a nagging thought in the back of my mind. Now that he mentioned it, something did seem strange about the position. The salary-to-work ratio wasn't adding up. I don't know, maybe this rule thing is legit. That or they could have a high turnover rate. Think about it. Not many people want overnight shifts, and plenty of folks wouldn't set foot in a cemetery after dark if their lives depended on it. Zach seemed to ease a bit. "You're probably right. People get spooked easily, and that has to be it." What has to be it? We both froze. The voice of a young girl drifted from directly behind us. I gulped, and Zach's teeth began to chatter. Neither of us had the slightest idea what to do. "Hello. Why aren't you saying anything?" I mustered up all the courage I had and turned toward our unwelcome guest. A little girl with blonde pigtails skipped closer to us. She was concealing something behind her back, a wide grin plastered across her lips. She couldn't have been older than 5 or 6 years old. "My name's Anika. What's yours?" she asked innocently. Again, we didn't respond. "None of you worker people are any fun. You never want to play with me," she huffed, her smile melting into a deep frown. I'd be lying if I said I didn't think about replying to her. Maybe Anika was just a lonely spirit who wanted some company. But I quickly snapped myself back to reality. No, we had been warned about her for a reason. "You're not even going to talk to me," Anika pouted, tears welling in her deep blue eyes. I weakly shook my head. Nothing in the instructions told me I couldn't at least do that. I instantly knew I had made the right decision. The little girl's eyes flooded with darkness until they were pitch black. She began to cackle, her demented laughs ringing out into the desolate night. She exposed her hands, revealing what she had been hiding. I choked on the scream. Anika was holding a bloody, dripping hatchet. "You chose wisely," she bellowed before turning back in the direction she came from. Zach and I watched as she skipped further and further away, before seemingly disappearing into thin air. Once the little girl was completely out of sight, we shared a glance. "What the hell was that?" Zach muttered. That I replied, "Pulling out the list of rules is proof that we aren't being hazed. Now we know that this isn't some kind of twisted joke." Zach mulled it over for a moment. I could see the cogs turning in his head. "Honestly, I still don't buy it," he concluded, continuing onward. I stared blankly at him, jaw agape. "What in the ever-loving hell do you mean you don't buy it? We just saw it with our own eyes." I mean exactly what I said? I don't buy it. It's got to be Jerry or one of the other watchmen testing us. Maybe one of them has a granddaughter who agreed to help out. I don't know, but it's going to take a lot more than a creepy little girl to convince me that any of this is real. He spat, snatching the talisman from his neck. I shook my head, breaking eye contact. What was I supposed to say to that? We had just seen a little girl with a bloody hatchet evaporate into the wind, and Zach still didn't believe it. I was dumbstruck. After weighing my options, I decided to catch up to my companion and continue our patrol in silence. I knew that nothing I could say would convince Zach that what we had just experienced was real. There was no point in trying. Eventually, we reached a gate at the far end of the graveyard. As my light illuminated it, I realized how poorly maintained it was. Its black paint was chipping, leaving multiple spots exposed to rust. But the most interesting part was that it was hanging wide open. Zach, do you know if this is supposed to be shut? I asked, searching his expression. He pondered it for a moment. I would think so. Maybe Jerry left out this way and forgot to close it. I slowly nodded my head. That didn't make much sense, seeing as the rear entrance led to a wide open field, but it was better than the alternative. Yeah, that has to be it. Nobody would even need to use this. I'll go close it. I marched up to the gate and grabbed onto the cool metal bars. A small creak emitted from the rusted hinges as I pulled. I had it about halfway shut when I paused. My heart suddenly began to race, and my blood ran cold. Because standing right outside of the cemetery's boundary was a man. The man outside the cemetery boundary was shrouded in darkness, making it hard to discern any details of his appearance. But something about him felt off. Hi there. I'm just going to close this gate. Okay, I said, my voice wavering slightly as I continued to pull the gate shut. The mysterious figure turned toward me, stepping into the dim light cast by my flashlight. His face came into view, a man, relatively young, perhaps in his late 20s or early 30s, but his clothes were what struck me. He wore a beige coat and a fedora, both of which seemed oddly out of place for mid-June. A lit cigarette dangled from his lips, the smoke curling up into the warm night air. A sinking feeling twisted in my gut. This felt wrong. No need to bother. I'll take care of it, the man said, his voice smooth and unsettling as he stepped into the cemetery. To my utter shock, he snapped his fingers, and the gate began to close on its own. I froze. Rule number 2 flashed in my mind: a demon will present itself to you. This must be him. Hey, who the hell are you? Zach interjected, glaring at the intruder. The man took a slow drag from his cigarette, exhaling deliberately before flashing Zach the creepiest smile I had ever seen. Given our encounter with Annika earlier, that was really saying something. My name is Amodius, he finally said, sending a chill down my spine. Amodius. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't quite place it. Well, Amodius, I need you to get the hell out of here before I call the cops. This is private property, Zach shot back, shining his flashlight directly into Amodius's eyes. I'm afraid I won't be leaving anytime soon. In the meantime, I think I'll stick around with you boys, the entity replied, marching towards Zach with an unnerving calmness. Zach's confident facade dropped as Amodius approached, his footsteps unhurried yet deliberate. The flashlight beam, which had been enough to deter Annika, seemed to have no effect on this entity. Zach, the talisman, I shouted, reaching for the ward around my neck. Zach frantically patted his pockets, his panic growing with each passing second as Amodius closed the distance. Hey, got it, he finally exclaimed, triumphantly holding up the cross necklace. But his victory was short-lived. I'm sorry, Amodius said, placing a hand on Zach's shoulder, but you're too late. My heart pounded like a jackhammer in my chest as I watched in horror. Before Zach could even react, Amodius's form began to dissipate into a dark cloud, which then flowed directly into Zach's mouth. The entire scene was surreal, almost as if time had slowed down just to amplify the terror. For a brief moment, I thought I saw Zach's eyes flash red before returning to their normal hue. Zach, I asked, unsure of what to do next. Zach blinked, looking around as if disoriented. Nate, what the hell just happened to me? I breathed a sigh of relief. Whatever that mysterious cloud was, it seemed that Zach hadn't been too badly affected. I think we just met the demon, and I think you were just possessed. Zach's face paled as he began to pace back and forth. What are we supposed to do? I can't be possessed. I've got too much to live for. Come on, Nate, I'm freaking out here. Okay, try to stay calm. Nothing weird has happened to you yet, so let's head back to the guard shack and come up with a game plan. Does that sound good? Yeah, you're right. I don't feel any different. Maybe it was all just another elaborate joke, Zach said, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his attempt at reassurance. I pursed my lips, doubting that this was a joke, but kept my thoughts to myself. After everything we'd seen tonight, it was hard to rule anything out. The walk back to the guard post was tense, the silence between us heavy with unspoken fears. Once we returned, I quickly locked the door behind us. What are you doing that for? Trying to keep me quarantined, Zach asked, raising an eyebrow. Not just you, both of us. Remember rule number 3? It's 2:35, but we spent a lot of time out there, I explained, double-checking the lock. Okay, enough with these stupid rules. We ran into a creepy kid and some oddball smoker. So what? That doesn't mean they're real, Zach retorted. All right, you're free to take that chance. Either way, I'm calling Jerry, I said, pulling out my phone and dialing our supervisor's number. He didn't pick up. When I turned back around to update Zach, I nearly jumped out of my skin. He was standing just inches away from me, a wide grin stamped across his face, and the entirety of his eyes were pitch black. Zach, what the hell are you doing? I stammered, backing up as far as I could until I hit the desk, sending a stack of papers fluttering to the ground. Zach isn't here right now, the entity spoke in a deep, gravelly voice. But Amodius is. I felt myself begin to quiver. Fine, Amodius, what do you plan on doing with him? Amodius began to cackle, completely disregarding my question. At that moment, violent knocks echoed from the door and windows. I could see what appeared to be invisible handprints slapping against the glass. Panic surged through me as tears welled in my eyes. This was too much, far too much. I darted to the other side of the shack, desperately trying to put as much distance between myself and the demon as possible. Zach's face turned toward me, the low laughter finally dying down. What am I going to do with this arrogant mortal? You ask, Amodius hissed, glaring at me but remaining motionless. I'm going to take his soul to the underworld, of course. He started cackling once more, his boisterous laughter mingling with the howls and rattling outside my little prison. I crumpled to the ground, curling into a ball and covering my head with my hands. 5 minutes. That's all I had to wait, right? But I didn't know if I could even make it that long without losing my sanity. Just as the noises around me reached a crescendo, everything suddenly fell dead silent, no whistling winds, no hands against glass, and more disturbingly, no cackling demon. I hesitantly lifted my head, fully expecting to find Zach looming over me, holding some sort of makeshift weapon, but he wasn't. Instead, I saw him go limp, his body toppling onto the desk behind him. I hurriedly rushed to his side, praying that he was okay. Zach, I shouted, shaking his shoulder. A muffled groan escaped his lips, and I exhaled sharply, feeling as if a weight had been lifted. Zach picked himself up off the desk, groggy, locking eyes with me. What just happened? I crossed my arms. You got possessed, started laughing, and then passed out. Do you remember any of that? Not a thing. Well, at least now you have your proof that this isn't a hoax, I said, exasperated. Zach opened his mouth to speak, but the buzzing of my cell phone cut him off. It was Jerry. I put a finger to my lips and answered the call. What do you want, kid? This better be good old men need their rest, you know. Yeah, I don't know if good is the word I would use, I replied, still a bit shaken. I could hear Jerry sigh over the line. Let me guess one of you knuckleheads broke rule number 2 and forgot your talisman. If you hadn't, you wouldn't be calling me, and if you had broken the other ones, you wouldn't be able to call me. Do I have that right? I shamefully stared at the ground. Yes, we ran into the demon named Amodius, and Zach wasn't wearing his necklace. I could practically see Jerry shaking his head in frustration. All right, I'll be up there soon. Don't let Zach leave until we can assess the damage. Are either of you hurt? Not physically, no. Okay was Jerry's last word before he hung up. I didn't blame him for being so short with me. He probably saw us as children left alone for a few short hours, and we'd already managed to mess up. What did he say? Zach asked sheepishly, meeting my gaze. He said he's on the way, and that he's going to kick your ass for waking him up when he gets here, I replied, half jokingly. Zach groaned. That guy's got a lot of nerve. My body gets commandeered by a freaking demon of all things, and Jerry's worried about his beauty sleep. God. I looked Zach directly in the eyes, taking an aggressive step toward him. Jerry wouldn't have to worry about you being possessed or losing a wink of sleep if somebody had just worn this stupid necklace. Honestly, I wouldn't mind kicking your ass either. Zach scowled at me before averting his gaze and mumbling under his breath. I didn't care. He needed to be put in his place. About 20 minutes later, we heard a pounding on the door. Hello. One of you nimwits want to let me in? Jerry's voice boomed from outside. I shot Zach a look. The cavalry has arrived, I muttered, walking to the door and unlocking the chain. I let Jerry inside, and he greeted me with a glare before marching directly up to my brainless coworker. The old man glowered menacingly, his eyes searching Zach's expression for some sign of remorse. Sorry, Zach offered, taking a step back. You better be. I was fast asleep until you two morons called me up here. Now what's this about a demon? I sighed, recounting the story to Jerry without omitting any details. He listened intently, his gaze never leaving Zach. All right, it's not that bad, Jerry finally said, pursing his lips. Not that bad? A freaking demonic entity took over my body and wants to eat my soul. What do you mean it's not that bad? Zach retorted, frowning at Jerry. I'm getting to that, geez. As I was saying. Jerry hissed, glaring at Zach. Amodius is the illegitimate son of Asmodeus, one of the 7 princes of hell, also known as the king of demons. Amodius was the product of a scandalous affair with a mortal woman. Asmodeus was so appalled by the weakness of his son that he banished him from hell for all eternity. Since that day, Amodius has been trying to harvest souls and send them to the underworld in an attempt to restore himself in the eyes of his father. So what you're saying is, Zach got possessed by a half-demon, I interjected, trying to piece it all together. Yes, Amodius is so weak that he can barely control his host's bodily functions. From what I've observed over the years, he can really only speak and take a couple of baby steps if he's lucky. It's a miracle that you didn't encounter his father. If you had met him, you would have been doomed. Wait, there's a second demon, Zach shouted, his mouth agape. Yes, there is. Stick around long enough and you'll meet Alizia eventually. She was confined here by a spell nearly 200 years ago. She's a direct descendant of Lilith, a real feisty one. She is. Okay, that's terrifying and all, but what about my situation? How do we get rid of Ammodius? I don't know about you two, but I would rather not have a loser half-demon taking up residence inside of my body. Jerry sighed. Well, that's where things get tricky. This won't be a quick fix. I'll need to contact a Catholic priest who has been ordained as an exorcist. It may be a while before you're demon-free. Zach's frown deepened. That clearly wasn't the answer he had been hoping for. So, what? I'm just stuck with this thing. What happens if Ammodius takes over while I'm driving? He could end me at a moment's notice. Jerry pondered for a moment. Then you should be fine. Contrary to popular belief, he needs you alive. Demons can only claim your soul if you make a deal with them, B, perform a certain ritual, or C, give them permission to take it. Unless you're an idiot, I assume options A and C are out of the question. And Ammodius isn't nearly strong enough to make you walk anywhere, let alone perform an entire sacrificial ceremony. I don't know, Jerry. Options A and C aren't entirely off the table. If you haven't noticed, Zachary here isn't the brightest crayon in the box, I said, smirking. I was rewarded with a scowl from Zach. Jerry pursed his lips before standing to his feet. He placed a wrinkled hand on Zach's shoulder. Son, if you're really as stupid as your coworker seems to think you are, then you're doomed. Otherwise, just don't do anything too idiotic until I can pull some strings. Okay. Whatever. Thanks for nothing, old man Zach whispered with a snarl. Screw you too, then. Have a fun rest of your shift. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have some sleep to catch up on. Jerry shot back, storming out and slamming the door shut behind him. Well, that could have gone better, I said, folding my arms across my chest. Yeah, you're telling me, Zach muttered, rubbing his forehead. The remainder of the night went by without a hitch. We had already encountered all the weird stuff, so we were able to coast until dawn. I wish I could say that clocking out was like a breath of fresh air, that all my worries had faded away, but unsurprisingly they hadn't. I slept restlessly, knowing what kind of atrocities my next shift would have in store. I yawned as I trudged up to the guard shack later that evening. I produced my keychain from my pocket and fiddled with it until I found the correct key. Just as I was about to insert it into the lock, the door was fiercely yanked open. Oh, hey, Zach. I didn't expect you to be here so early. Zach's eyes were wide and bloodshot, his hands jittery, and his hair unkempt. If I hadn't known any better, I would have thought that a meth addict had infiltrated my post. Yeah, I couldn't sleep, so I came in early. I just drank 2 entire pots of coffee. Never had coffee before. Do you know what that stuff does to you? Huh? Caffeine. It's like a drug, you know? I feel like I could do anything, like I could fly if I wanted to. Great. So my dumbass coworker was damn near overdosing on caffeine. Awesome. Just how I wanted to start my shift. I pushed past Zach, punched in, and then turned back to him. I flicked him in the forehead. Oh, what was that for? You shouldn't have done that, Nate. I'm gonna. No, you're not going to do anything. You're going to sit in this chair and stay still until I tell you to move. You're high as a kite on caffeine, and lest we not forget, you're also possessed by a demon. Now, sit down and shut up. Zach glared at me, puffing out his lower lip. You're not my dad. Yeah, I know. That man deserves a Nobel Peace Prize for keeping you out of trouble for so long. Anyway, let's take a look at the list for today, I said, waving the piece of paper with the word Tuesday imprinted at the top in bold letters. Well, what's it say? Zach asked, literally 2 seconds after handing me the page. I thumped him on the forehead again. Patience is a virtue. Start working on it. Zach mumbled something under his breath before gazing up at me thoughtlessly, his left leg bouncing up and down like a jackrabbit. I sighed, praying that the rules wouldn't be too awful. Unfortunately, my prayers fell on deaf ears as I began to read aloud. Rule number 1 early in your rounds: a skinless woman will appear to you. Flash your light at her and shout, "I command thee, return to the shadows from whence you came. She will follow you for the remainder of the night from afar, but she will not harm you." Rule number 2, at 10 minutes past midnight, take the vial of goat blood from the drawer and spread it across your forehead. It will ward off the banshee. Rule number 3, a curse has been placed on all 5 members of the O'Connor family. They will rise from their graves and wander around the premises. They will not attack you unless provoked. Keep your distance, just to be safe. Zach and I locked eyes, our jaws hanging open. What the hell, I muttered, scanning over the list again to make sure I wasn't going crazy. "Nate, I don't want to do this anymore. I think I need a career change. This is too much." Zach stammered, his confidence visibly shaken. I thought about it for a minute. The pay was incredible, yes, but did I really need this job? Would I be able to live comfortably without it? A big, fat no flashed in my head like a siren. I normally would have thrown in the towel, but I had some hefty expenses, and I couldn't afford to quit. I don't want to do this either, but I also don't have a choice. And if I were you, I'd be inclined to stick it out as well. After all, I doubt Jerry would be willing to help you out of your little predicament if you quit on your second day. Zach sighed. "Yeah, you have a point. All right, let's get this over with." We each armed ourselves with a flashlight and headed out. I tucked that night's list in my pocket, just in case. The walk down the rows of headstones was tense. Each tiny movement was enough to make me jump. My heart exploded in my chest with every rustling leaf and whistle of the wind. The knowledge of what we were about to see put me on edge. And Zach wasn't faring any better. Due to the copious amounts of caffeine he had consumed, he was even more jumpy than I was. "Hey, Zach," I said, keeping my eyes glued to my surroundings. He cautiously turned to face me. "What?" "What if she doesn't show up? Does that count as breaking the rules?" I froze when I saw the look of unabated terror etched across his features. He was as pale as a ghost, and his hands were trembling, the beam of his flashlight trained on something behind me. Dread bubbled in my stomach. I didn't want to look. I didn't know if I could look, but I didn't have a choice. If I wanted to escape with my life, I needed to follow the rules. I whipped around, ripping off the Band-Aid. I cannot even begin to do justice to the abomination that stood before me. A red, pulsating mass leered back at me, slimy, exposed veins throbbing in unison. That thing, it had no eyes, just empty, pitch black holes where they should have been. The way it stood there felt wrong. Its head was cocked to the side, like a curious dog taking us in, studying us. I hyperventilated as I shined my flashlight into the monstrosity's face. It stumbled backward, raising its fleshy arms to shield itself from the light. I hurriedly ripped out the rules and read from the page. "I command thee, return to the shadows from whence you came," I said in the loudest, most confident voice I could muster. The writhing mass of muscle and sinew tipped its head downward at me in what I assumed was a glare before it reluctantly slunk into the darkness, growing further and further away with each step. I watched it retreat until it stopped at the perimeter of the grounds. My heartbeat still hadn't completely settled, but I released a breath and turned to Zach. All the blood suddenly drained from my face when I did. Zach was gone. "Zach, this isn't funny. You can come out now," I called, cautiously approaching the spot where I had last seen him. I shone my flashlight down adjacent rows of gravestones, but the only sound I could hear was my own ragged breathing. "Marco," I tried, my voice trembling with nervousness. Polo, a deep, menacing voice replied from directly beside me. I gulped, recognizing that twisted inflection. "Amodius," I squeaked, peeking behind the nearest headstone. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. Zach shot up from his hiding spot, now standing inches from my face. His eyes were again completely shrouded in black. Come on, Emodius, we don't have time for this. Zach isn't giving you his soul anytime soon, so you might as well give it up. Oh, I wouldn't be so sure about that. You see, Zachary seems to be a very lonely man, and who better to befriend than the O'Connors? They really are nice people once you get to know them. A disturbing grin inched across Zach's lips as he pointed to a silhouette lumbering along in the distance. My heart dropped into my stomach. He couldn't be serious. To my immense dismay, Zach lurched toward the figure, taking a huge, awkward step forward. I knew that I had to intervene. I leapt in front of him, halting the demon in his tracks. Stop. I won't let you attack that thing, I warned. Emodius snarled at me. Get out of my way. With one fell swoop, he smacked me square in the chest, sending me sprawling to the ground. Harmless, huh? Can barely take a few baby steps, huh? Yeah, thanks for the warning, Jerry, I cursed inwardly, rising to my feet. The distance between Zach and the zombie-like figure was closing. I slowly shook my head. Zach wasn't going to like it, but I knew what I had to do. I marched up to Emodius, who to Jerry's credit was struggling to put one foot in front of the other. Didn't I tell you to? Smack. I punched him in the face as hard as I could. Zach's body crumpled in a heap on the ground. I grimaced as pain jolted through my knuckles like a lightning bolt. Mission accomplished, he was down for the count, and not a second too soon either. When I turned around, I was met with a downright horrifying sight. What had once been a man stared at me with one glassy pale blue eye. The other dangled uselessly from its socket, hanging on by a thread. Decaying flesh sloughed off his face, leaving areas of exposed sinew and tendons. Maggots writhed beneath his loose skin, intermittently falling to the ground. I was rooted to the spot, my breath hitched in my throat as I awaited the corpse's next move. After a tense moment of silence, the cadaver released a low moan before turning and ambling in the other direction. I gasped for air, placing a hand over my heart. That was a close one. I was going to have to keep my guard up. As the fear began to dissipate, I crossed my arms and glanced down at my unconscious coworker. What am I going to do with you, huh? Can't go 2 minutes without getting yourself into trouble, I muttered. Zach released a small fart in response. Yeah, I feel the same way, I said, cracking a smile. Just to be sure I wasn't forgetting anything, I pulled out the list of rules I had tucked into my pocket. I frowned as I scanned over them again. I had forgotten about rule number 2. I hurriedly checked the time. We had 7 minutes. I vainly tried to pull Zach along, but years of Netflix marathons and gaming sessions hadn't exactly worked to bolster my strength. I began to panic. The guard shack wasn't too far away, but I definitely wasn't going to be able to get Zach there. That left me with one option. I dropped Zach's arm to the ground and bolted. I ran as fast as my legs could carry me. The entire time, I had the creeping sensation of being watched. I shined my flashlight toward the perimeter of the graveyard and nearly leapt out of my skin. That thing, it was still there. It had been tagging along behind me the entire time, sticking to the shadows. I can't be certain, but I could have sworn that when my flashlight beam had landed on its face, I saw it grinning at me. That only motivated me to run faster. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. There it was, the guard shack was in sight. Once I finally closed the distance, I flung myself through the door and began rummaging through the drawers for the vial. I was such an idiot. I should have taken it with us from the get-go. I tossed aside various trinkets and papers until I found it a glass bottle filled with dark crimson liquid. I poured a splash of the goat's blood into my hand and unceremoniously swiped it across my forehead. I glanced at the clock on the wall. 3 minutes. With our saving grace in hand, I sprinted back to the spot where I had abandoned my coworker. Even if he was knocked out cold, I didn't want to know the implications of failing to ward off a banshee. I ran like my life depended on it. For all I knew, mine may not have been at risk, but Zach's definitely was. He might have been an idiot, but he didn't deserve to die an excruciating death at the hands of some eldritch deity. By the time my incapacitated coworker came into view, my legs were burning and my lungs screamed at me to stop. Fortunately, my adrenaline fueled me to continue onward. But finally, after what felt like an eternity, Zach's immobile form came into view. My heart dropped into my toes. Someone was approaching him, and it wasn't any of the O'Connors. When I was about 50 feet away, I was able to clearly drink in her features. My worst fear was instantly confirmed. A woman with white, flowing hair was walking toward Zach's motionless body. She wore a white nightgown to match, and she had no shoes. At that distance, I couldn't tell if she was young or old, but I did begin to pick up on something that I hadn't noticed before crying. The woman sobbed openly, tears flowing down her face. The sound of her lamenting cries made my blood turn to ice. She was going to beat me to Zach. I prayed to any god who would listen to help Zach to get both of us out of our shitty situation. And something must have listened because, at that moment, Zach sat up. "Wait, who are you?" he asked groggily, staring up at the woman shuffling over to him. She was so close. I had to think fast. "Hey, Zach, over here," I shouted. He spun to face me. "Close your eyes." The moment that Zach's eyelids shut, I reared my arm back and chucked the vial directly at his head. Each second felt like a lifetime as the bottle whirled through the air. I was eventually met with the sound of shattering glass. I pumped my fist. The vial had exploded on Zach's head, the dark, viscous liquid dripping down his face, and not a moment too soon. The woman had stopped crying, her mouth open, prepared to unleash an ungodly shriek, one that never came. Upon seeing Zach's bloody forehead, the woman closed her mouth, turned, and walked away as if nothing had happened. Oh, thank goodness. "Zach, you're one lucky son of a gun. You know that," I said, trotting up to him. "Oh, yeah? Well, I don't feel like one. That hurt, man. How would you like to have a glass bottle smashed over your head?" he retorted, picking crimson shards from his hair. "If it saved my life, I don't think I would have too much to complain about." "Let's get you cleaned up," I said, extending a hand. Now that's an idea I can get behind. Soon enough, I found myself back at the guard shack, plucking tiny glass fragments from Zach's head. Not how I pictured my night going, but hey, we were both alive, and that was all that really mattered. "Hey, Nate," Zach said, shattering the silence. "What's up, man? Can I ask you something?" I pursed my lips. That's not a question anybody wants to hear. Well, it depends. What do you got for me? Okay, so I know the pay is phenomenal, but with all the crap that we've been through, why haven't you quit yet? I know it hasn't even been 2 days, but anybody else would have been running for the hills by this point. So why haven't you? I sighed. The pay, that's all there is to it. Oh, come on, man. That can't be it. It's not worth the risk. There has to be something deeper. I paused, taking a deep breath. I knew this would probably come up eventually, but I was really hoping that it wouldn't. All right, fine. But it's some heavy stuff. You have to promise me that what I tell you stays between us. Okay, I said, setting down the tweezers and maintaining fierce eye contact with him. I promise. All right. Don't say that I didn't warn you. Zach nodded, indicating for me to begin. I glanced down, summoning the strength to do so. I exhaled sharply and spoke. When I was 22, I was an alcoholic. I would start drinking at 7 on the dot every evening and go until 1 or 2 in the morning. Nasty hangovers every time I woke up. You see, after I graduated college, I couldn't find a decent job, while all my classmates got to kick off their brand new careers. I was stuck. I didn't get it. I wasn't bad in interviews by any means on the rare occasions that I would land one, but still, nobody was willing to give me a chance. So I drank to take away the sting of rejection, of complacency, a feeling like I was never going to amount to anything. And that's where I messed up. I couldn't see it then, but I had the world at my fingertips. I had so much to live for, and I threw it all away. I paused, glancing down at my feet. Nate, I'm sorry. Look, you don't have to continue if you're not comfortable with it. I can tell that you've been through a lot. No, I said, meeting his gaze. I've started this, and I need to finish it. Zach nodded, staring at the ground. Okay, whenever you're ready. As you can imagine, I wasn't in the best headspace. Well, one night when I was absolutely plastered, I was really craving a pizza, and that led to the worst decision of my life. Instead of placing a delivery order, I drove to Pizza Hut. It was only 5 minutes down the road. Surely nothing awful would happen on that short of a drive, right? Wrong. I never should have started that car. I was so drunk that I could barely put my key in the ignition. That should have been my indicator to stop. But I didn't. The last thing I remember is pulling out onto the main road. After that, my memory is blank. All I know is that the next day, I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed. Zach stared at me, his mouth agape. I could tell he was trying to find the right words to say, but I didn't want to hear them. I wasn't worthy of anybody's sympathy, not after what I had done. It turns out the man I killed had a family, a wife, and a 3-year-old daughter. They were present at the trial. And I couldn't bring myself to look that woman in the eye. She was crying the entire time. And that's when the true weight of my actions really sank in. I had taken everything from her. That little girl has to grow up without a father because of me, because of what I did. I steadied myself, wiping the tears from my cheeks before continuing. The judge gave me 4 years. The family pushed for reckless homicide, but I got off easy. I only served 3 before they let me out on good behavior. It's been 2 years since then. And I haven't touched a drop of alcohol. This is the only job I can get that will pay this well. I know that I don't deserve it. I don't deserve money, and I don't deserve happiness. I took somebody's life away. I should be rotting in a cell somewhere. But even so, I'm still trying to make it up to that family, to that little girl. I know that nothing will correct my mistakes, but that won't stop me from trying. I had a contact from inside track down where they live. And every month I drop off any money that I save in a blank envelope. That's why I haven't quit. I need this job not for me, but for them. It's only right after what I've done. When I finished, Zach didn't lift his head. His elbows rested on his knees. For a minute, I thought he might have zoned out, but after a tense moment of silence, he reluctantly looked me in the eye. I'm sorry. I didn't know. You did a messed up thing, but does that really mean you have to punish yourself for the rest of your life? That one selfish action will cause that man's family to suffer until the day they die because of that. The answer is yes. There's no changing my mind on this, I said, wiping a stray tear from my cheek. I deserve to work this twisted job and deal with whatever demented crap this place has to throw at me. I won't be quitting anytime soon. Zach didn't respond. He simply averted his gaze, his eyes returning to the ground once again. Before I knew it, Tuesday had come and gone without any more notable encounters. At sunrise, all of the creepy demonic entities returned to wherever they had come from, but they weren't the ones that I was worried about. With the weight of our previous exchange, I half expected Zach to skip out on me when it came time to return to work, but to my surprise, he didn't. As we come to the end of this unsettling tale, it's hard not to wonder how much of what we consider impossible might actually be closer to reality than we think. Stories like these remind us that the line between the known and the unknown is often more fragile than we'd like to admit. If this story left you with chills or questions, let us know in the comments below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're craving more content that dives into the mysterious and the unexplained, make sure to hit that subscribe button. By joining our community, you'll never miss out on the next story that just might make you question everything you thought you knew.